It's been a long day, hasn't it? Let's press pause together. Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory. If you're here, it means the day is done and the quiet has finally arrived. Tell me, what time is it, where you are right now, and what's your favorite way to end the day? If these stories bring you peace, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing them with someone who needs a little calm. Now, let's begin. You never mean to find it. That's the first rule of the shop. Though it's not written anywhere, not on a map, not in any guidebook, and certainly not on a sign above the door, because there is no sign at all. It's tucked between buildings in a part of town you don't usually walk through. Maybe your route shifted today because of construction, or maybe your phone died and you stopped checking directions. Maybe you just needed to breathe for a minute. And this little alley, mossy bricks, quiet air, the distant smell of roasted chestnuts offered you a pause. And in that pause, you turned left where you usually go straight, then stepped past a laundry line and a crumbling wall, and suddenly there it was. The door is narrow and painted a dark green, the kind of green that reminds you of forest shadows or your grandmother's old teacups. The glass is frosted, but not because it's dirty, it's just old, and it carries the weight of years gently. The brass doorknob is warm, even on cold days, and it turns easily, as if it's been expecting you. You won't hear a bell when you enter. The shop doesn't like to startle anyone. Instead, the door clicks shut behind you with a soft thud, and the silence that follows is the kind that knows how to hold space. The air inside is cool, but not cold. It smells like dust, paper, a hint of cinnamon, and something you can't quite place a scent that tugs gently at your memory, but stays just out of reach. The walls are lined with shelves, but not in any particular order. Some lean slightly, like they've been listening to stories all night. Others seem to curve ever so slightly toward you as you pass, not in warning, but in welcome. Books, yes, thousands of them, but also objects that shouldn't be here, and yet somehow belong. A teacup with a cracked rim, a music box missing its key, an envelope with no stamp, but your childhood street written in familiar cursive. You stop walking for a moment and just let yourself be still. The shop is quiet, but it doesn't feel empty. The quiet here feels shared, like it knows what you've been carrying and wants to give you a little room to set it down. You're still with me, aren't you? That's good. You've made it this far. Breathe in slowly and let that exhale be a release not of everything, just of the weight you don't need right now. No one asks your name. No one comes to greet you. But somehow, a mug of warm chai appears on a low table beside an armchair you hadn't noticed. And when you sit, it doesn't creak or resist. It remembers you, even if this is your first time here. The shop doesn't offer answers. It offers echoes. A soft mirror held gently. As your fingers wrap around the cup, the warmth reaches deeper than your hands. You glance to your left, and on a shelf just beside you is a book. No title, no author, just a soft green cover that looks somehow like it's been waiting. You don't pull it down. Not yet. The moment isn't asking for action. It's inviting you to listen. You've been so good at carrying. Let this be your moment to simply rest. The door closed behind me with the sound of an old book closing gently, not with finality but with care. Inside, the shop felt neither dark nor brightened, simply adjusted to my presence, as though it had taken one soft breath when I entered and then settled again. The scent met me first, warm paper, the kind that lives in libraries that no longer keep hours, something faintly spiced, like orange peel and worn wood, and a note of fabric warmed by sun, though no windows gave a clue where the light came from. Shelves lined the walls in quiet spirals, some stretching too high for ladders, others low and close to the floor like they were meant for sitting beside. There was no one at the counter. In fact, there didn't seem to be a counter, just a cluster of stacked books around a worn stool and an old ceramic mug that still steamed gently, waiting for someone to return. I took a few steps forward, and the floor creaked underfoot. Not an alarming sound, but one that said, "You're welcome here." A book fell softly from a shelf just to my right. Not tumbled, not pushed. Just slid. I stooped to pick it up. The cover was cloth-bound and navy blue, the title faded, or maybe never printed at all. I opened it without hesitation and found the first page filled with handwriting. Not mine, but familiar, like something from a letter I never sent. The words weren't full sentences, just small, gentle thoughts. You were kind when you didn't have to be. That moment mattered more than you know. You showed up. I turned the next page and found a photograph tucked between the paper and old photo of a cafe I hadn't thought of in years. The one where I used to sit after class when everything felt too heavy. The chair I always took. The tea I used to order. I hadn't told anyone about that place. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the book open in my lap, and let the stillness of the shop wrap around me like a shawl pulled up on a quiet morning. There was no music playing, just the sound of time softening. Another shelf creaked gently, as if stretching, and I looked up to see a second book now leaning out just slightly. I didn't move. Not yet. The shop didn't rush. It didn't sell. It offered, like a memory you stumble into while looking for something else. I traced the inside of the book cover and whispered a thought I hadn't heard in years. I didn't think anyone remembered. And I could have sworn the light above me pulsed once, warm and slow. If you're still with me, I want you to remember something too. It's okay to hold small moments close. It's okay to rest here. Not every place asks something of you. Some places simply say, "You belong." I closed the book gently and placed it on a low bench that hadn't been there when I walked in. The mug still steamed quietly on the stool nearby, and for a moment I thought I saw someone turn the corner in the next room, but when I stepped forward to follow, there was only a hallway of books and a door at the end I hadn't noticed before. I walked slowly, each shelf whispering in that hush of unwritten pages. The door waited. It wasn't locked, and when I touched the handle, it felt warm, like it knew I'd be back. I opened it, and what I saw inside wasn't what I expected, but it felt unmistakably like something I'd left behind long ago. The rain had eased by the time I stepped back outside, but the sky remained wrapped in that soft gray hush that makes every footstep sound quieter, as if the world itself is trying not to interrupt your thoughts. I tucked the small parcel under my arm The book, the tea bag, the folded page of handwritten lines, and started walking without really aiming anywhere. I passed the bakery again, its windows fogged with warmth, and I noticed a couple laughing gently over a shared cinnamon roll, heads leaning in. Their joy didn't shout, it glowed. A cat watched me from the windowsill of a bookbinder's shop next door, blinking once, then curling back into itself. It felt like the street knew I had just come from somewhere soft, and it didn't want to jolt me. I kept walking. At a bench under a tree with late autumn leaves still holding on, I paused and let the parcel rest in my lap. I peeled away the string and opened the pages carefully. It wasn't a storybook, not really. There were no chapters, no title, no author's name, just small entries, little vignettes like journal fragments from someone I hadn't met, and yet every word felt oddly familiar. One page read, October 17th. She stopped carrying the umbrella after she realized the rain felt like something washing her clean. Another, June 3rd. He stood still in the coffee line and knew, in that one quiet breath, that he was enough. I didn't know these people, if they were real, or if they were simply the reflections of someone else's noticing. But I felt them. I felt them like I had felt that chair inside the shop, worn to fit someone exactly like me. I turned another page and found one with no date at all, just a line across the middle that said, "You're not forgotten, not by the world, not by yourself." I closed the book slowly and let my eyes soften to the gentle sway of the street. Somewhere nearby, a doorbell chimed. A bicycle rolled by, its tires whispering against wet stone. I leaned back against the bench, and for a while, I didn't think about where I needed to go. I just let myself sit. Are you sitting too? Or maybe lying down now, your body growing heavier in that nice kind of way? That's good. Let yourself soften. Let your breath match the pace of this quiet street. You're safe here. You're seen. And there's no need to hurry back to anything. After a time, I gathered the book gently, tied the string back around it, and walked home slower than usual. When I reached the corner where the shop had been, I looked back, half expecting it to still be there. But of course, the windows were blank. No sign, no glow, just bricks and glass, and the soft hum of something that had already moved on. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt something more like being held quietly from a distance. And when I turned the final corner toward home, I noticed I was carrying myself differently, lighter, as if the book I held had taken some of the weight I didn't know I was carrying. The tea cooled slowly beside me as I wandered deeper into the back of the shop. The light changed again as I moved, not darker, not brighter, just warmer, like stepping into a room where someone had already been thinking of you. Shelves narrowed, ceiling lowered slightly, and the books became older, quieter. Not dusty, but worn in the way good things are when they've been held with care. I reached for a small green hardback whose title had long since faded from the spine, and as I opened it, a pressed clover slipped from the pages. It fell gently to the floor, and I crouched to pick it up, fingers hovering just above. For a moment, I didn't want to touch it, not out of fear but reverence. A memory rose to meet it, soft and uninvited. A summer field, my knees in the grass, the voice of someone I loved saying, "They find you when you stop looking." I didn't remember when that moment had happened, but I knew it was real. The shop had found it somehow. I smiled and placed the clover gently back between the pages. A warmth passed through my chest, as if something had unknotted quietly. The shop didn't hum, but it did breathe like its walls expanded just a little to let that memory land without breaking. I returned the book to its place and kept walking. Around the next bend, I found a table that hadn't been there before. On it, a map, not of a city or a country, of something stranger. The shape was fluid, half recognizable, the names of places written not in lines or grids, but in feelings. Soft September, near the window where you sat, where the letter was almost sent. I ran a finger over the paper, tracing a path that led not to a destination, but to a time when you last felt understood. I didn't take the map. I didn't need to. It had already offered what it came to give. Are you still here with me? You can let your eyes soften now. Let your breath steady. This moment doesn't need anything from you. Let the quiet carry you like a worn blanket pulled to the chin. You've done enough for today. I stepped away from the table, heart a little fuller, head a little lighter. The shelves opened again into a space I hadn't seen before. A round alcove with a skylight above. Rain had begun, just lightly, and drops kissed the glass in no particular rhythm. A single armchair faced upward beneath it. I sat, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't think about the next thing. The shop didn't urge me forward. It didn't promise any ending. It simply let me be, held gently in its quiet watchfulness. Outside, the world turned a little more slowly, and somewhere in the shop's heart, something ancient smiled, not in pride, not in victory, but in recognition. You had found your way to stillness, and stillness had been waiting. There's something that happens in a space like that when you stay long enough to stop looking and start noticing. I found myself drawn not to the books with gilded titles or old leather spines, but to the ones whose covers had no names, no marks at all, just worn fabric or soft canvas, like they had never belonged to a library or store, but to someone's lap, someone's hands. I slid one from the shelf. Its blue-gray cloth cover warm from the sun filtering in through the stained glass window. Inside, the pages weren't blank, but neither were they filled with words. Instead, each page held something else, scraps of music, handwritten in pencil, notes in the margins that read like questions never asked aloud, a pressed leaf tucked neatly into the center. As I turned to a page that held a single sentence in looping, careful script, I felt something settle in my chest. You didn't forget. You protected it. I paused, unsure whether the words were meant for me or just from someone who had written them long ago, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They landed where they were supposed to. The light in the shop had shifted again, though the windows hadn't changed. The air felt warmer, more familiar, and in the soft hush of the back room, I realized I hadn't heard a clock tick or a bell chime since I entered. Time had begun folding in on itself, not in confusion, but in kindness. I sat down on a velvet cushioned bench beneath the front window and looked out through the curved glass. The street beyond had blurred slightly, like a memory viewed through tear snot from sadness. but from depth, from meaning. I closed the book in my lap, gently, and looked up to see the shopkeeper again. Not startled by her presence, but reassured. She stood beside a small table with a fresh cup of something warm already waiting. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was an answer to a question I hadn't asked. I took the cup, held it with both hands, and breathed in the scent. Cinnamon, vanilla, a hint of something like rosemary. It was comforting in a way I didn't expect. I felt her eyes on Menot watching, just witnessing, and in the quiet that followed, she finally spoke. That book has belonged to many people, but only one at a time. I didn't ask what she meant. The weight of it settled gently, like snowfall on branches that already knew how to hold it. She returned behind the counter, and I stayed there, the cup warming my palms, the silence in the shop humming like a low lullaby. You're still here, aren't you? That's good. Stay in this breath. Let your shoulders drop. You don't need to carry any answers right now. Let the shop hold your questions for a little while. I closed my eyes for a moment, and in the hush behind my thoughts, I realized something. I hadn't felt rushed since I arrived. Not even once. The world outside had paused, and the stillness inside was enough. I didn't want to leave, not because I feared what was beyond the door, but because I knew now I could return here. Or better, this place could return to me whenever I needed it. Even if I couldn't find the alley again, even if I forgot the turns, the shop was already part of me, and its door, somehow, would always remember. I returned to the shop the next day, not early, not late, just when my feet decided to follow the memory. This time, I didn't hesitate before turning down the alley. The door was already open a crack, and the scent of old paper and something like sandalwood met me halfway. Inside, everything was as it had been, and yet slightly softer, as if the air itself had grown thicker with trust. The corners of the room no longer seemed shadowed, just dimly held. I walked between the shelves without aim, but the books greeted me all the same. Their titles changed as I passed, some turning toward me just slightly, others whispering familiar phrases that tugged at the corners of memory. I reached out to a deep green spine I hadn't seen before and pulled it gently from the shelf. No title, just worn leather. Inside, the pages were filled with writing my own, stories I hadn't written yet, moments I hadn't lived, but somehow already recognized. A cabin window with rain tapping on it, a laugh I hadn't heard in years, but could feel in my chest. The last page was blank, but not empty. It felt like an open hand. I looked up to find the shopkeeper nearby, her arms resting gently behind her back. You found the one meant for this moment, she said softly. Her voice felt like a wool blanket pulled up over your shoulders at just the right time. It's okay if you don't understand it all. You don't need to. I smiled without meaning to, that strange kind of gratitude that doesn't land in words. I placed the book back where I'd found it, but it didn't feel like I was leaving it behind, just giving it a moment to breathe. Are you still here with me? Has your breath softened yet? Let it. Let yourself settle a little deeper. You don't need to figure everything out tonight. You're allowed to simply be exactly as you are. I wandered toward the back of the shop, where a staircase I hadn't noticed before curved gently upward. You can go if you'd like, the shopkeeper said, her voice low. There's nothing hidden, just more space to remember. The stairs creaked gently beneath my steps, like they were exhaling stories of their own. Upstairs, the room was round and filled with cushions and lanterns, and a single window that overlooked the rooftops and the slow amber sky. I sat cross-legged on a cushion near the window and looked out not at the view, but at the feeling. Something about this place made me feel like a page inside a book long overdue to be read. And somehow, I knew I wasn't here to learn something new. I was here to return to something old, something gentle, something mine. The window fogged slightly with my breath, and I stayed right there in the quiet, letting it hold me like a story that didn't need a plot, just presence. That evening, as I sat again in the corner chair with the small cup of honey tea in my palms and the city light just barely brushing the window, the shop felt even quieter than before. Not empty, not distant, just full of the kind of silence that holds rather than lacks. I hadn't asked for anything that day, no request, no question. Yet, as I looked up from the steam curling gently above the rim of the cup, I saw it, a new shelf that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps it had, and I'd simply never noticed. It held no books, no maps, no records or trinkets, just boxes, small, stacked, carefully labeled, each one handwritten as if gently addressed. I rose without urgency and moved closer. The top box had my name on it. Only my first name, but written in a hand that looked like my grandmother's. I touched it, half expecting it to dissolve, but it was real. And inside, no great mystery, just objects that should have been long lost. A pressed flower from the pages of a book I loved at 16. A key to a drawer I hadn't seen since university. A single tiny note that read, in the gentlest cursive, "You were always paying attention, even when no one noticed." My breath caught not from shock, but recognition. I closed the box gently and placed it back. Another next to it bore no name at all, just the word before. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The shop was never about answers. It was about giving space to questions you'd already carried long enough. I turned back to my seat, heart slower now, thoughts soft as fog. And as I sat again, I let the quiet settle like a blanket drawn up just beneath the chin. Are you still listening? Good. Let this part of the story wrap around you like wool warmed by a fire. You don't need to understand everything. You only need to feel safe enough to stop running. The tea had gone cool, but I drank it anyway. And for the first time since I stepped through that door, I felt not like a visitor, but someone who had always had a place here. The bell above the door never rang that day. No one entered, but I think someone left a version of myself I no longer needed to carry. The shop had done that without asking, without pushing. It had simply waited until I was ready. I looked around once more and whispered, barely audible even to myself, "Thank you." Not for any particular thing, just for the space, just for the remembering, just for letting me sit down and breathe and be. The bell above the door made the same sound it had. The first time I stepped inside, a quiet chime that felt less like a greeting and more like an exhale. The air hadn't changed. It still smelled like old wood, distant rain, and paper that's held too many dreams to stay crisp. I stood near the threshold a little longer than usual this time, unsure whether I was arriving again or saying goodbye. The shelves hadn't moved, though I noticed a book turned slightly outward, one I hadn't seen before. Its spine was unmarked, its cover soft, as though it had been handled by someone who needed it just as much as I did now. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some stories are felt more deeply before they're read. I traced my fingers along the edges of the shelf, passing the drawer full of postcards, the jar of fountain pens, the worn map that never quite pointed to anywhere specific. Each item now felt familiar, not like something owned, but something remembered. And just then, I saw the notebook I'd tucked away days ago. Was it weeks? Right where I had left it, but with a page gently folded over, as if someone had read it and wanted me to notice. I turned the corner and found the old counter empty. No sign of the shopkeeper today. Just the little wooden dish holding smooth stones, and a cup of tea that hadn't yet gone cold. I took a seat by the window and let the quiet bloom. Outside, the street carried on. The world hadn't paused. But inside this space, time folded like soft fabric, and I let it wrap around me one final time. There was no sign saying, "Thank you for visiting." No receipt, no book to stamp. Just this. A hush that understood. A hush that made space for things we rarely speak aloud. You're still here, aren't you? Take a breath. Let it rise and fall without needing to go anywhere. You've done enough. You've arrived. And if something inside you softened during this story, if you remembered something, or simply felt less rushed, that is more than enough. The bell above the door rang softly once more, not because I opened it, but perhaps because someone else had just found their way in. I left the notebook open on the table, a small note written in the corner. Come back when you're ready, or even before. And then I stepped out into the evening, carrying nothing but stillness. The shop behind me faded into the corner of the street. No sign, no name. Just a presence that waits for no one, and somehow still finds everyone who needs it.